Hello, y'all. Welcome to Untied We Stand. I'm Kevin Putzier, and it's been a hell of a long time. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve. It's been approximately 8 months since the last time I made a video, and since then a lot of things have gone very, very wrong. On August 29th, my father passed away from complications from a stroke after a very long time struggling through it. That's what I've been doing, is taking care of my family shit and going more than a little insane. I have gotten myself back together to a large extent, and I am now about to begin college for the first time in my life. I'm going back for political science starting on January 8th. I'm sure anybody who follows me finds that real surprising. Kind of like, water being wet. But anyway, that's where it's at. I'm intending to continue to make videos. I will continue to expand on the ideas of universal basic income, the fact that civilized nations have health care as a right, things of that nature. But here I just kind of wanted to do a little update, let y'all know that I didn't vanish into the ether. It's just, I'm glad 23 is over. This is my Annus Horribilus, however you say that. Definitely a horrible year. My dad did not deserve to die the way he did. If we had proper health care in this country, they would have caught the extent of his arterial disease years and years ago. Even given that, they should have, looking at his previous medical charts and things like that, the state of medical care, even when you do have insurance, is egregious in this country. He was 84 years old. He would have made 85 a few days ago. Didn't quite happen. In the interim, back in November, I became a senior citizen. Thing that I can't quite wrap my head around, but I'm 55 now. And while dealing with my grief, dealing with life being fucked up, a lot of thoughts, a lot of things whirling in my head. But the biggest one is, you got one life. There are ways to extend it that we're working on this in science, but they're not there yet. And I haven't done the things with mine that I want to. One of the things that I've wanted to do for a very long time is have some influence on what happens in the United States. Maybe get some things rolling, make it so that, we become a exemplary country like we once were. We've always had our problems, and that's some of the things that we need to face. We need to have a reckoning with our past, not, as the MAGA people say, to make everybody feel guilty or otherwise, cause trouble, but just because we simply need to deal with it, and we haven't. Our nation was founded on some lofty ideals and the backs of slaves. Both of these things are true. One of them is not so good. Also, during the time that we were talking about those lofty ideals from multiple sides, the Cherokee, which I am, negotiated in good faith with the United States of America and got basically exterminated. This is something, okay, we hear quite a bit about Black Lives Matter, and indeed they do. The voice we're not hearing a whole lot is Native voices. Because in that, the bad side of America was quite successful. We, and I don't just mean the Cherokee, I mean all with Native blood, are less than 2% of the population at this point in time, and we were here first. Genocide is an ugly thing, people. Some of the tribes didn't survive it. I bring this up because right now we got something similar going on in the Middle East. Now, I don't believe that Israel is deliberately trying to commit genocide. But it kind of looks the same, doesn't it? The Likud party needs to step down. just like the Republican Party in the United States needs to step down. Your ideas are out of date. They don't work anymore. You want to continue to have the groups with nothing but hate in their hearts, yet keep poking them. Desperate people do desperate things. It is the nature of desperation. This is the kind of thing that we need to get a grip on as a species. We've got the environmental crisis going on. We've got all of these things coming together, and what are we doing? We're still fighting over dusty ancient books in a dusty ancient land. But the people in Gaza are getting killed left, right, and center, and most of them have nothing to do with Hamas other than being under their thumb. This war could be fought better. Now, I'm not going to be one of those people that's like, oh, Israel shouldn't have responded. Of course they should respond. They got people slaughtered. If they didn't respond, they didn't have the right to be a nation. But they're going about it wrong. You want to go hunt down Hamas? Go hunt down Hamas. Yeah, they have extensive tunnels and stuff like that. Well, the Mossad and other military intelligence and civilian intelligence within Israel have been noteworthy for their ability to target individuals for a very, very, very long time. They don't need to flatten Gaza. They need to see and assassinate people. Not that that's the right thing to do, but it's what needs to be done if they're going to eliminate Hamas. So they're right now making the Western world, whether they know it or not. Benjamin Netanyahu probably knows that the internal conflict is good for him. It's not good for Israel. It's not good for the United States. It's not good for Palestine. It's not good for the world. Of course, we've got all the nonsense going on in Ukraine still too. Russia is trying to reestablish their dominance while demonstrating that they completely forgot the Soviet playbook. Something of a student of military history and tactics. Not formally, just an avid war gamer. And if you really want to win with armored cavalry, use American equipment and Soviet tactics. Putin doesn't have either one. He's got Russian equipment, which is largely junk. And as near as I can tell, his military doctrine has been throw waves and waves of people at those who are hiding in the shadows, shooting them down. It's like, now I don't want to give him any ideas here, so I'm not going to go into what he should have done. But he's got the playbook, unless they burned down the Friends Academy. Which, who knows, maybe they did. I don't have any access to Russia. But moving on from that, the way the war has been fought was stupid from day one. That being said, they have the numbers to throw at it, and the Ukrainians have taken a beating. And there was no purpose in this war. If there were any Nazis in Ukraine, which there probably are a few, I mean, there's idiots everywhere, they weren't really doing anything. The Russian-speaking people in Crimea were not having any real problems there other than Russian occupation making life difficult. The invasion has done nothing good. So we basically got two major wars going on, neither of which has any great purpose, all of which could lead to a wider conflict. The people of these countries need to take control. I don't know how that's going to happen. There's a lot of different ways it could go down, but basically, if these conflicts keep up, it's going to widen, it's going to escalate. And particularly in Ukraine, sooner or later, some idiot is going to take a shot at a NATO nation. Article 5 isn't absolute, but it's pretty close to it. That would be World War III. One would hope that the United States, having been dumb enough once, we would figure out that nobody should ever actually use nuclear weapons, but humans don't have a real good record on being bright when there's something that can be blown up. This is somewhere we need to get a grip. And as the externalities, internally, Joe Biden has done a lot better as president than I expected and is not getting the credit for it, nor is he capitalizing on it correctly. Once again, Democrats are pretty good at getting things done and really, really bad about letting people know. The country remains very divided, and a lot of the reasons behind it are suspect at best. Once again, there's a lot of polling going on that's showing nonsense. That's something I want to touch on here a little bit too. Is like these polls are showing pretty much a dead heat between Joe Biden and the orange shit given. Not only don't I believe them, I don't believe either side of them. Why? Because these polls have sample sizes in hundreds, and they're supposed to represent the entire nation. I can find that much division down my street. We are a nation of nearly 350 million persons, at least 2/3 of who are of age to vote. A sample size of 800 tells you fucking nothing. Now, I've done some statistical work. Statistics is really difficult and very highly predictive, even with relatively small sample sizes. But when you're sampling something this big, you need multiple samples, and then you need to do a meta-analysis of all of them, because the country is too diverse in too many different ways. It's like, okay, I live in bumfuck Idaho. I can go 130 miles to the south, 300 miles to the east, 400 miles to the west, and hit different metropolitan areas in different states, particularly in the order I just listed there. That would be Elko, Nevada, which is not a huge city, but it's big enough to be a decent sample. Salt Lake City, Utah, or Portland, Oregon. Now, I've visited all of these multiple times in my life, and the cultures in each one of them is radically different. The United States is united in name only. Polling 800 people and extrapolating from the whole nation is ludicrous. Of course they're going to get it wrong. Now, with the amount of people here, what's a good sample size? That's a harder question. But it needs to be a lot wider. They need to, for one thing, sample multiple areas. Not a poll of residents of Long Neck, New York, or Boise, Idaho, or whatever. They need to like hit a few thousand people in all 50 states. Then do the analysis. Yes, that's much more mathematically difficult, but it'd also be a lot more accurate. And my suspicion is that you're not going to find a dead heat. You're going to find a lot of disgust on both sides, but generally I think that you will find that those that want to burn the nation down are a distinct minority. I live in MAGA country, and yet when I speak with my neighbors, most of them, even if they're flying the flag, they're not going to go to war over it. They're frustrated. They have seen government self-flagellate and get nothing done for 50 years. That their putative leader is a Hitler wannabe who hasn't got the intellect to actually do it doesn't change it. He's a figurehead. We could tap into that, those of us who want to move the nation forward, fairly easily, just simply by being progressive. When you talk to these people, they're worried about government overreach, but their leaders are doing government overreach more than anything else. Whereas if we were to establish, safety nets, take the pressure off, then we can start dealing with things. Because right now, in places like this, the little town I live in is growing because people who work in Boise can't live there. It's too expensive. So what do? They move out here. And it's like, a 50-mile commute. And it's still bloody expensive, but it's cheaper than Boise. And there's a lot of that going on, and a lot of displacement. The economy at the upper end is actually doing really well. Surprisingly enough, coming out of the pandemic with all of the garbage that went on with that. Economically, we have turned around quite a bit at the top. And the economists keep looking at this and saying, look, consumer index is up, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? I'm a poor motherfucker and guy. It ain't getting better on my end. It ain't getting better for the people that the Republicans know how to rouse up. Minimum wage has not changed since 2009. In 2009, you couldn't really live on it. And let's talk about that a little bit too, because minimum wage, as originally envisioned, was supposed to be enough for one person to support a family. The year I was born, it did so. Reference back a little bit here. I'm 55 years old. It's been a minute. When I went out on my own at age 17, a minimum wage job at full time would support one person. As in, would support you. I did it for a while. You could afford an apartment. It wasn't much, but you could afford it. You could afford to eat. If you needed to, you could afford to go to the doctor, to the emergency room, because back then it cost about $100, as long as you didn't have to do it often. Or you could go to walk-in clinics where it was a little cheaper. But nevertheless, you could make a living at minimum wage in the late 1980s. By 1990, that was no longer really true. When the wage went up to $5.25, of course, the CEOs predicted the end of the world. What really happened is the nation got a little more prosperous because those of us at the bottom could eat again, or pay our rent, or both. Again, when it went up in 2009 to $7.25, the most recent raise, for a minute things equalized. It's like, yes, prices go up a little, but they act like it's going to go up like really, really disproportionately, and it can't. It doesn't need to. If you're paying your employees twice as much, which it wasn't even close to that, but let's just say that if you're paying your employees twice as much tomorrow as you are today, you don't have to raise your prices by double, because it's a volume business in most cases. And the ones where it's not, it's already included in the price. Like artisan work is expensive. Bespoke or custom, whichever word you prefer, that kind of stuff is going to be done by usually a very small organization splitting the cost amongst themselves. And yes, it's going to be higher. It doesn't count to those who are working at the low wages. Minimum wage jobs are generally mass production or mass communication or something of that nature, where the income is much, much, much greater than the wages. To give you an idea, in the restaurant industry, where I have the most experience, most companies aim to keep their labor costs under 20%. So if their labor cost doubled and they raise their prices by about 10 to 15%, it would still come in under 20%. Because they're not paying them by the amount of volume they do, they're paying them by the hour. Their advertising budget eclipses that really quickly if they are even halfway effective. So raising the wage to where people could actually live is actually good for the economy. Those people too will buy things. Those people are not going to sit at home or fail to spend that money because, hey, they need it. The plight of the poor is not a moral failing, except in one way. Some very immoral people at the top, starting about the time my father was born, maybe a little bit before that, did everything they could to break the backs of labor in the United States. For the most part, they failed at that time, but then they just incrementally got better and better at taking a little more away, 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 until now we got nothing. And they sowed distrust amongst us. The problem of racism in the United States isn't just about race, it's about dividing us. Those who promote it the most have the most to gain from us looking at each other with hatred instead of them. "95% of the wealth in the United States is owned by less than 10% of the population." That's bad enough. But it's more deceptive than that when you think about it. Because just 3 men have more wealth than the other half of the nation. There are a little over 700 billionaires in the United States. Now that number sounds big when you're just thinking about it, compared to yourself. But again, there are 320 million citizens of the United States. There's a 330. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to look it up, but it's a lot of people. The people who have half the wealth could all stand on my front yard. They'd be crowded, but they could stand there, all of them. My front yard is not that big. I live on a third of an acre. Keep that in mind when you think about these people that start whining when they can't get their next gold-plated yacht while 600,000 people sleep outside. There's no purpose in that. There's no reason for that. It's wrong. Now, those of you who follow me know that I'm a proponent of UBI, and those who followed me a long time know that I used to be an anarchist. If we're going to be honest, I'm still an anarchist. I think that the principles of anarchy make a lot of sense, but we're not in that world. The world we're in demands governance. And what we've got right now is a clown show. It's not governance. Like, there's a few serious people in Congress and a whole lot of idiots. So my goal in learning political science formally is to, in a few years, probably about halfway through my schooling, to run for the House of Representatives. I'm a progressive-leaning person. I would probably run as an independent. In Idaho, that has a fair chance of winning because if you run as a Democrat, they're just going to throw rotten apples at you and not hear what you have to say. And Democrats have largely been ineffective. This is my biggest issue with the Democrats. They know what needs done. They talk about it. And they talk about it, and they talk about it, and they'll, in the years when they are not in power, they will work hard to get to those levers of power. This is the one area where the Republicans beat them every damn time. The Republicans don't have a plan. They don't care about the future. But when they get hold of that lever, they know how to pull it. Democrats, it seems like, we got to get up there, we got to fix this, we got to get up there, and then all of a sudden there's those levers over there. What do we do with that? I don't know, George, let's not touch that, okay? We've never had that before. Yeah, you've had it before. We live in a nation that is paralyzed by its polarization. One side is timid and the other side is trying to burn down the nation. When the timid side gets told of those levels of power, you got to put that aside. Whatever you're worried about, whatever problems you have with the idea of exercising power, you get your hand on that lever and you pull that motherfucker, because you have to if we're going to get anywhere. Like I said, I've had some time to think. My thoughts have been kind of dark. I mean, I lost my dad. We have, as a nation, slid further and further to the side of authoritarian nonsense. The band-aids for the poor have expired. We have a huge homeless problem, and nobody's doing a goddamn thing about it because deadlock, because nobody's willing to govern who's currently has enough of a majority. In fact, in the House of Representatives, jumping Jesus on a pogo stick. They kicked out their speaker for leading. Okay, Kevin McCarthy was a wet noodle, but they kicked him out because he did his job. These are the people supposedly in charge? Yeah. Okay, I can't stand the man and his policies. I hate that he has the same name as me. But at the end of the day, he made a small compromise to keep the government moving, because that's what needed to be done. At the end of the day, he did the right thing. Might be the only time in his whole fucking career, but he did. And they kicked him out for it. And now they've got a tool in there who thinks I should be dead. Because I ain't white and I ain't Christian. But he has no power either, because they got that stupid rule under the one person, one guy. Or even half a person like Matt Gaetz can bring a motion to get rid of the Speaker of the House to the floor and have everybody vote on it. That's ridiculous. I mean, one person should be able to promote the motion, obviously, but I mean, any kind of parliamentary rules that you can bring a floor vote from one person. It would be laughable if it wasn't so fucking dangerous. We need to reevaluate. So, I'm all over the place here. This is not scripted at all. I just decided I'm going to get back into it. And kind of wind this together if I can. From my own side of things, it's been a really horrible year, but the United States isn't doing a hell of a lot better than I am. If we're to be honest, though, our economy is doing fairly well. It is time to ram down the throats of the morons that we need to fix shit. Europe, for the most part, has done really well on human rights and various other things like that. Their people are not living on the streets. For the most part, poverty is not a huge issue in most of the European Union because they deal with it. And they dealt with it starting just after World War II under our direction using the Marshall Plan. They learned the lessons we taught them. We didn't. We are the wealthiest nation on earth, and yet 80% of us have very little. There's no reason for that. Tax is a tool that helps to raise revenue. Tax does not have to be spent entirely on externalities. It's like, yes, we're still seen as the leader of the free world. We're not leading and we're not free. We need to fix that. We can. When you start looking at who to vote for coming up in the upcoming elections, say, okay, I'm going to be straight up here. I don't think that Joe Biden is the best possible choice for president. I think he's the only choice for president. Why? Because he has the brand name recognition, and if you vote for somebody else in the presidential election, Trump's going to win. Maybe from prison. That's how fucked up it has become. But the president executes the will of the Congress. Every 2 years, the entire Congress can be replaced. Think about who you're sending to the House of Representatives. Senate is a longer game. The House of Representatives can be changed radically in one election. Look for progressives and independents. Look for people who in Europe would be considered moderate, like me, but who are in America progressive, who are going to go to their seat in Congress and shake shit up. And they're going to abandon the Democrats' motto of now is not the time. Guess what, motherfuckers? Now is the time. Our planet is burning. 2023 was the hottest year on record. 2022 was the hottest year on record previous to that. 2021 was the hottest year on record previous to that. You see where we're going here? Like, the energy sector is starting to get better in some ways. There's more and more solar, there's more and more wind. Our biggest issue is that the peak production is not also, or the peak usage is. That's a matter of making storage batteries, and that's probably going to be somewhat polluting in the short term, but it's not carbon dioxide, it's not warming the earth, not near as much. Storage can take a number of different ways, and that's what we need to do, is work more on that. Again, I'm all over the map here. There's a whole lot of things that need to happen, and they need to happen now. And we need to have the vision to make them happen now. To anybody on the right that might happen to stumble across this, I would like you to realize something. That government here is us. We are the government. That's what a democracy means. That's what it comes down to. Yes, it's rule of the majority, and yes, there needs to be some limits on it. Because straight up, you can take anything to its extreme, the slippery slope fallacy. The reason that a slippery slope is a fallacy is because those things could happen but are not necessarily likely to. This is, in anarchist circles, people talk about this quite a bit. In a pure democracy, if 4 people said the 5th should die, he should just accept it. Okay, it's not a straw man, but it's not valid either, because that's not how humans work. We're social animals. We're not going to do that. Not as a corporate whole, and yeah, gangs and stuff, but it's an extremely unlikely scenario. However, democracies do need some bounds, and that's why we have things like a constitution. However, on that, a constitution that never changes is a dead letter. It's like this whole living document thing that they're always going on about, or used to be. Now this originalist bullshit can just go away. But the old argument of the living document that even people I respect use, I disagree. If it was intended to be interpreted by the time it was in Article 5 would not exist. Article 5 of the Constitution has exactly one purpose: modifying the Constitution. All the other sections have multiple purposes. Article 5 has just one. Kind of makes it seem like the founders might have thought it was important, don't you think? In a thriving democracy, things get amended quite a bit. We have several amendments that need to happen. I'll go into that more another time, because I'm going to propose some of them, but one of them is the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment. The idiocy of overturning Roe versus Wade would not have mattered if the ERA was in place, because it covers it. It makes it so they can no longer make the, well, it's not in the Constitution argument, because it would have been part of the Constitution. There's a lot of things that can be done about gun violence and within the current frame of the Constitution, because, well, despite what certain idiots, many of whom live around me, would say, the Second Amendment is very, very clear who has the authority to regulate the militia. How do I know this? Because the Constitution of the United States is the government that regulates the regulatory power of the United States, and the Second Amendment starts off with a well-regulated militia. That's pretty much a mandate, people. Anyway, I'm going everywhere. Coming back around to where I'm kind of leading to in the future, since this is already likely to have gotten long, I'm going to explore some of these topics more in depth in future videos, and I'm going to try to keep it a little shorter and more focused. Most of what I do going forward will be scripted. From time to time, I'll get on the video and ramble like this. But for the most part, it'll be much more targeted. The areas that I am going to focus the most on as I prepare to run for office are universal basic income, universal health care insurance, enshrining certain rights in the Constitution that should exist anyway, because those rights do exist whether they're codified or not, but they can be taken away if they're not codified. We're running into the problem that we used to have prior to this Constitution, where the government is not powerful enough in the areas where it needs to be. The difference is, at this point in time, the government is too powerful in areas where it need not be doing anything. We need to fix the fences. That's one of the things I will be concentrating on in what I propose, is how do we do this? Like, yeah, we can definitely provide a universal basic income. You want to start off with GBI probably, because you got to build up to it, and that's fine. A guaranteed basic income is good enough to get things rolling. That in itself would end poverty. Not make everybody rich, but end poverty, and that's good enough. It's a start. Universal health care is the hallmark of a civilized society. If you don't have it, you're not a civilized society. We don't have it. Yeah, I said it. I'll keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying it until healthcare is a right like it is in civilized nations. And I will be talking quite a bit about gun violence as well, because we have a huge problem here, and we're ignoring it. And to all of you out there on the right who love to send thoughts and prayers, shove it. Your comrades are sending bullets. And sooner or later, we're going to send them back. That's not an outcome you really want. I know a lot of you talk about it like you do. Oh, we're going to go to war for turn back. No, you're not. You might try an insurrection, but you know what? There's more of us than there are of you. And unlike the cosplaying fuckstains that I see around waving their AR-15s that they don't know which end shoots of, for every one of you, there's 10 like me and a soldier. I can take that AR-15 years after you've dropped it on the ground, disassemble it, clean it, put it back together, and fire it accurately. I don't want to, it's a shit gun, but not to mention which a bloody revolution like that is not a good idea. But you'll lose. I see a bunch of people on Twitter. It's funny, all these white people voted for Biden. Where's their flags? Where's their stickers? Where's their blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe we're having a cult. I voted for Joe Biden. He was not my first choice. He wasn't my second choice. Hell, he was my fifth choice. You know what? He's the man the party unified behind. And then he was the one the country unified behind. It wasn't that close, people. In places it was because of the electoral college system, but if you look at the popular vote, it was not close. Which is one of the amendments that needs to happen. The electoral college is a historical relic that fails to work. It was never really that good. It was a compromise based on a bunch of nonsense. Basically to make it so slave owning states didn't have to have their slaves vote. Hi, Kat. How you doing? It doesn't work anymore. Everything else is a popular vote. Used to be the Senate wasn't. We amended that. May or may not have been a good move, but we did. That was the point where most of our government became an actual democracy. Before that, it was only the House of Representatives that we had a general vote for. Well, now it's the House of Representatives and the Senate. Time to make it the president. And yeah, I think I want to talk about a little bit more about Joe Biden because I've followed his career for a very, very long time. I've always been a politics junkie. Long before I decided to actually do anything about it, I paid attention. He doesn't talk slow and careful because he has dementia. He talks slow and careful because he stutters. Stuttering is generally caused when your brain is running faster than your mouth can handle. Stuttering is a speech pathology that does not exist in the unintelligent. As a matter of fact, most of the mental illnesses don't exist in the unintelligent. Depression even is more represented in those with a high IQ. Anxiety can affect almost anybody, but again, the higher your intelligence level, the more likely you are to be anxious. You see the point here? He stutters. He's had a lifelong problem with stuttering. If you listen to him when he was younger, whenever he talked fast, he bloody lost it. Now he'll trip over a word here and there. He speaks slowly and deliberately because if he doesn't, he fucks up his speech. It has nothing to do with dementia. Yeah, he's old. He's almost as old as my dad was. But he's doing all right. So he's not going to run any marathons right now and finish them, or at least not win. Who cares? It's not his job. The mind is okay. The mind is doing well. The Democrats ignoring this issue is kind of dumb because they could slam it down their throats. It's like, okay, you got the orange figurehead who barely knows English, has demonstrated over and over again that his level of intelligence has 2 digits at best. I don't think he's demented. Well, I do, but not in the medical way. But let's put it this way. You'd have to break it down to tiddlywinks for the two of them to compete on anything like an even grounded Joe Biden that'd still win. Is he a great leader? No. Is he a good leader? Yeah. I was kind of hoping for a great leader this time around, but that didn't happen. So I'm saying we need to give him one more term while working on bringing in younger, bolder people. Not just to the presidency. In fact, not even particularly to the presidency. It doesn't matter that much if the president's an old man. He's one guy. Yeah, he's the face of the nation. But the laws that he is bound by come from the House of Representatives and the Senate, where we have power. Vote for people that are going to get shit done. If you got somebody that says now is not the time on the issues that are facing us today, don't vote for them, even if that's who your party backs. If you got somebody that wants to take us to the authoritarian extremes that the right does right now, don't vote for them, because you know what? That never works. It works for a minute. Dictatorships can make things look really good for a minute. Then it all falls apart because it's all for the glory of a few people. And it's left with everybody else doing nothing or going to die, or wars. Dictatorships don't end well. Democracies have a tendency to fizzle if you don't have a well-educated and involved populace. Right now, we don't. That being said, the second oldest democracy in existence right now, the Swiss Confederation, is doing just fine. Their constitution gets amended quite a bit. And before somebody decides to call me on this, yes, I am aware that the Swiss Confederation existed considerably longer than the United States. It didn't become a democracy until a little after we did. A few years, I can't remember exactly when, but it was... The founders of this country were still alive. And the way Switzerland does it is the way that we need to start looking towards. The semi-direct, I mean, not exactly, because we're very different people, but the Swiss Confederation is a semi-direct democracy. They have a parliament, much like our Congress. They have a president, and those people enact legislation and execute legislation, but they also have a general ballot franchise that anybody can propose, and if they can get significant amount of signatures, the citizens directly can propose laws that the whole country votes on, up to and including constitutional amendments, and they use it. Idaho has a similar mechanism. The United States of America generally does not. Idaho is dominated by the right, but from time to time, the people step up. The most recent example I can think of is Medicaid expansion. Under the ACA, the states, because of an idiotic ruling by the Supreme Court, and once again the Democrats saying now is not the time when they had power, has a big fucking hole in it. This was supposed to be covered by the expansion of Medicaid by the states. A whole lot of states, all red, decided they were going to not do that because reasons. The main reason being it benefited those who needed it. Idaho passed Medicaid expansion over the severe objections of our legislature by citizens' referendum, and it wasn't even close. We fucking nailed them. Idaho legislature then decided they were going to ignore it or modify it, in which case we took it to court, and our Supreme Court ruled that yes, indeed, our lawfully passed amendment was the way it was going to be, no matter what Butch Otter thought. Oh, and on a side note, during all this debate, Butch Otter said, if those of you who are not from Idaho probably don't know who Butch Otter is. He was the governor of Idaho before Brad Little. He was the lieutenant governor under Phil Batt. Phil Batt was a good man. I knew him, both of these people. Butch Otter, how to say this? Butch Otter is the kind of miserable son of a bitch that if you could drown at birth, you wouldn't feel any qualms of conscience about it. Even though, yeah, I'm not going to go too deep on it. Butch Otter is a cruel, vicious son of a bitch who nobody likes. There's quite a few people that followed him to power, but cruelty has always been his point. So, during this debate, he said that we didn't leave bloody footprints at Valley Forge for healthcare. I couldn't stop laughing about that. I'm still laughing about it. Years later. Like, the people at Valley Forge mostly died of disease because they were trapped and their surgeons had died. Yes, we left bloody footprints at Valley Forge for healthcare, you fucking idiot. Anyway, moving on. This video is rather long, but I'm going to post it up pretty much unedited, and it's reaching no real conclusions, except this. I am going to be learning the nuts and bolts of the political process, getting ready to run for office, and now is the time.